Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Kayla Lords.
John Brownstone.
Of Loving BDSM, where we help kinksters like you have happy, healthy power exchange relationships. We are back for another month of Kinky Book Club because for us, reading is how we learn and learning is how we continue to have a happy, healthy power exchange relationship.
True.
This month is a nonfiction book, so no worries about spoilers. Also, though, we will probably handle this month's book differently because I don't want to go chapter by chapter with this book. We're just going to kind of scoot around and talk about it in vague terms because we read a book that was outside both our comfort zones a little bit.
Well, outside our normal range, yeah.
Definitely outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Let's go there. That's Radical Ecstasy by Dossie, Easton, and Janet Hardy. They have written the new bottoming book. We talked about that already. They've written the new topping book. They've written actually a ton of other books. But this one was suggested by a kinkster friend of ours, and we went, sure, we'll try it. And it was an experience.
It was. Now, I really enjoyed the new topping book, the new bottoming book. Very good reads.
Yes, they're very useful in terms of understanding a very concrete concept. The struggle with Radical Ecstasy. Yes, struggle is the right word.
It's the right word, yeah.
And they even say this in the very first, forward pre-chapter 1 section, trying to set expectations, is that they're trying to take something that can't really adequately be put into words and put it into words. Radical Ecstasy is not a how-to book. It is not an advice book. It is an exploration of the author's experience with, there's lots of words to describe it. You might say the transcendent, ecstasy, bliss, out-of-body experiences. Tantra might be something that people are familiar with. It's sort of the, what I would almost call the woo-woo side of the experiences we can have in BDSM with a partner, often with a partner, that take us sort of outside of ourselves. I don't know necessarily that it's the subspace, top space thing all the time. I think it can be beyond that. I think maybe subspace and top space might be part of this. But you don't have to go to space in order to have sort of the larger experience where the wider world sort of falls away and you are in this moment and all you know is you and your partner. And in some cases, the way they describe it in the book, an out-of-body otherworldly experience. So this book was a hard read for me.
Me as well. I normally don't struggle with reading books, especially a book like, technically like this, because I'm always looking for those little nuggets that I can find in anything. But I had a hard time reading it. I had a hard time relating to it.
There were definitely parts I could not relate to. We've talked about this in past books that we've done for Kinky Book Club. Once it got to their personal stories, I actually had to skim through that. It was a little too much like being a voyeur, and we know I'm the anti-voyeur. I really just, please don't make me watch anybody do anything ever. I did find some nuggets. I was sort of surprised at how often I was highlighting things, but until I gave myself permission to skim through the parts that I just couldn't at all relate to, I would probably still be in chapter 1 struggling through it. And so I think this is a good thing to remember for any reader of any book. First of all, you are not required. There's no law that says you have to read every single word on the page. Skim reading is valid. It's a form of reading. Do you get as much out of it? Maybe not. But do you, like in my case, do you find the little nuggets of things that you do relate to by bypassing the stuff that the moment you look at it, you go, oh, no, I can't. Not gonna lie, there's an entire section on breathing, and then there's another section in the book on chakras, and I went, yeah, no, can't do it. Are there valuable pieces of information in those sections? I'm sure there are. Those valuable pieces of information are clearly not meant for me in this time of my life.
Yeah.
We own the book. We can read it anytime we want.
True.
If we ever change our minds.
Yeah. What shocked me, I went into this actually looking forward to reading it. A while back, we read a book on the spiritual side of rope.
Oh, yes,
I don't know
yes,
if you
yes.
remember that. I can't think of the title offhand, but I liked it. It was a good book. It really struck a lot of chords with me, and while I'm reading it, I'm going, yeah, I can relate to this. I can relate to that. And I originally went into this book with the same mindset. And yet, as I started reading it, I just kept getting bogged down more and more with it.
I think a little bit, the book, and I cannot think of that book right now, but I will pop the cover right here. And we have a review of that book in another video. That book was a good combo of, here's what I think this spiritualish side means, paired with, here are practical, not tips or how-tos, but sort of practical information for how this works in the real world. Whereas in this book, the authors, they wrote it back in 2003, 2004. They relied very heavily on their personal experience to paint a picture of what they meant. And I think that could, for some people, could be hard to read. When I was reading the reviews of this book, because it's been around for so long, there are reviews dating back more than 10 years ago on Goodreads, and some people were very annoyed with the book because it did not meet their expectations at all. They wanted something deeper, and it was too surface level for them. Other people were kind of like us, of, ooh, this isn't working for me. And then some people, I think, if I was going to try and say who might like this book most, it's people who have heard the terms chakras and tantra and transcendentalism. Am I saying that word right? Y'all know what word I'm talking. Transcendence, right? And you recognize the words as concepts. They intrigue you, but you're not already deep in it. If you're deep in it, this book probably will disappoint. If you're like me and you know that you're just not wired for that, not interested, there are too many other ways to explore BDSM, it's just not that interesting to you, and yeah, it's up in the air. You probably do a lot of skimming. And if you're deep into that radical ecstasy side of kink, this might feel way too basic for you, because it's not a true deep dive into all of the principles or all of the ways to explore it. It's a bit of a surface level explanation paired with, here's how we explored it. In terms of reading other people's experiences, that could be fascinating for somebody, but I don't know that it's as teachable as some readers might want. So that's something to think about. There were things that did strike me, though, and I was surprised because I think what struck me about them was that these are things that I relate to already. I just don't think of them in these terms of out of body, spiritual, otherworldly connections. The little bit I connected with was definitely what I call my woo-woo side, and I don't have much of one, but that did touch me. So there were some things, and I figured, if nothing else, we could talk about those things. So I'm gonna grab my notes.
Okay, let's dive into some notes here.
Okay, so from the very beginning, what I really like about the authors is that they always set expectations for you. They try to define what they mean. And I have the same struggle in BDSM, where things are very subjective, and one person's word usage will mean something different than another person who uses the same word. They were trying to be very, very clear of what they meant. And this, I went, yeah, I get this. It says, your authors believe that one of the things that feels so very good about orgasm is that it's most people's easiest pathway to something that feels like oneness with the universe. When you're busy coming, you're too damn busy to worry about where you end, and everything else begins. So for just those few seconds or minutes, you get to float or shimmy or tremble or convulse or scream or bellow in a place outside space and time and boundaries. Extremes of sensation or emotion or loss of control that we experience during peak BDSM moments carry us into those same transcendent spaces. This is one of the reasons why scenes that look violent and off-putting to outsiders can in fact connect us in a loving and profound way. When we drop our boundaries, we flow into each other. And I got that because I thought of all the times we've had one of those scenes where we stopped seeing anything else.
Right.
Like the whole world dropped away. That didn't have to be orgasm. It could just be a really good spanking. It could just be really good paddling, whatever. But for those moments, we've talked about it in the terms of energy is the word we use.
Yes.
The energy is flowing through us and between us, and we are both giving and receiving. And we know that there's an audience out there, maybe.
Right.
But for me, it tends to kind of go dark around the edges. All I know is this spanking bench, this St. Andrew's cross, you right next to me, what you're going to do next. All else falls away. And the way they talk about this throughout the book, that's kind of the imperfectly worded thing that they mean when everything else falls away and all that's left is that thing between you and the person you're getting kinky with.
I agree with that so much. And for me, it kind of goes beyond even the immediate surroundings. It kind of goes, I can actually let go to the point that I'm not thinking about the stuff around the house that has to be done, the laundry that's waiting, the grocery list, everything just floats away, and it's being in the moment.
And that, I would say, is a good portion of what this book is about everything falling away and you're just existing in the moment. Now that looks like a lot of different things, and they have a lot of different information about how you can kind of help yourself get there. But that is the thing I did understand, I did recognize for myself, because we've had those experiences.
Sure. Yes.
In another part early on, they're talking about sacred spaces. So the idea being that sometimes you go to a space that is sacred and you're able to have this transformative experience. Sometimes you create that sacred space between you and the partner that you have in this kink moment. But on sacred spaces, they had something to say. In sex and SM, they focus a lot on sex and sadomasochism. Don't worry, actually in the book, towards the end, they do actually talk about dominance and submission. It's kind of nice. Anyway, in sex and SM, the play party or scene space is often the special bounded space that we hold sacred, where we show our most vulnerable insides in order to travel together into ecstasy, where we make and keep a special commitment to mutual safety and respect for everybody. Sacred space is intimate space. Our temples, our playrooms, our dungeons, everywhere we gather together to practice. And I thought, to me the dungeon is the dungeon, our bedroom is the bedroom, but there is a moment I have felt, not every time, when we've gone into the dungeon, like the rest of the world falls away.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit, especially when we used to go during the daytime, we would walk in from a bright sunshiny day. We were probably wearing our vanilla clothes. We were not dressed up for kink or anything. And maybe we had just dropped a kid off at school. We had just been talking about work. We were talking about where we were going to go get breakfast later. It was a very vanilla thing. And then we walk into the dungeon. The door closes behind you. And even in the middle of the day, the dungeon is kind of a dark space.
Yeah, dimly lit and
Right. The walls are painted a darker color. And it's a little bit like stepping into another world.
Yes.
And now that we are both very comfortable going to dungeons, that world is very comforting. The only time I'm not comfortable is if it's a brand new space. And I'm like, I don't know the vibe here yet. And I totally get that for new people who can be very fearful of going. You can be very excited, but also very, very nervous.
Right.
And for me, it's like, okay, I am who I am in this space, but I am my kink self in this space. And this space is where really good, interesting, and also fucked up things are gonna happen that can't happen outside this door.
Anywhere else, yeah.
And I get it. Depending on the club or the dungeon or the party that you go to, there's also a culture around that. Are the people who run that space and in that space respectful of the fact that this is a place where very intimate things happen? We have been very fortunate everywhere we have ever gone. That's exactly the vibe.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't go a place where I didn't feel that. Not because I hold kink to be this automatically sacred thing, but because those are such special moments, even when we don't plan for them to be, quote, special moments, we're just there to have a good time. You almost never know if that's going to be the time.
What's going to happen, yeah.
Right, when the energy is going to flow. We've talked about this before, witnessing a scene. There were actually two scenes going on, one on this side, one on that side of the room. And it was almost like they were throwing the energy back and forth.
Exchanging energy, yeah.
Yeah, they were in their own scenes. They even said later they didn't even notice the other couple getting their groove on, basically. But as witnesses to it, we watched everybody feeding off of everybody's energy. One dom would hit their sub with a whatever, and that sub would react in a certain way, and then almost like they volleyed it over the net. The next dom would do their thing, and they would go back and forth. And those experiences, even though I hate watching any previous video, you will know I'm the anti-voyeur. Even I could not be affected by that.
Right.
And once you have those experiences either watching or playing for yourself, I feel like you get that sense of it even when you just walk in. It's just, you know what this space is, and you might not call it sacred. That's not a word I would usually use, but it is a special place.
Sure. I've heard it said in certain things, like the bedroom should be set up so it is a place that you can go and rest and, relax the mind and walk away from the things of the daytime. And I believe in essence that's kind of what they're talking about here for this.
I think so too. And I think that while dungeons and play spaces can sort of have that vibe, you can create that vibe for yourself wherever that you're with a partner. They were just talking about that, and I just connected with that.
Yeah.
So there were times where I highly related just to the authors themselves. It was like, yes, I feel you. There was a whole chapter or section, I think, devoted to the idea of connection. Connection was something that did speak to me. You and I feel, are very highly connected.
Right.
And I feel our connection very deeply in our power exchange, and certainly when we get our kink on. That's when we get our kink on. For us, it's usually impact play. That's a very physical connection, and then in power exchange, it's a very mental and emotional connection most of the time. So I did not know which author this was, so I apologize. But one author said over a couple pages, so this is squished, two quotes squished together. It says, how I make connection with other people. And the truth is, once again, I don't know. I do make connection. I've got lots of evidence of that. And I know how to make connection. That's why I'm here writing this book, sharing all the ways I know. But I don't understand about the magic. Continues, more often I get a sense of rightness, like the power is upon me. High contrast to my more normal state of worrying about everything and the constant conviction that I'm doing something wrong. And I was like, yeah, I as an anxious person worry all the time. And I actually, my coping mechanism is to plan. I don't want to worry, so I just plan. And that still happens in power exchange. It still happens in kink. Of course it does. But there are those moments when we connect, and I won't say this is an audible thing, but it does feel like we almost click into place, and we make that connection with one another. And the anxious part of me sort of slips away. It's like, no, we're good, because the moment feels so right and the connection feels so right. It's a bit like that part of my brain can just turn off, and we're good. Doesn't matter. I think that's a little bit of why it's easy to keep coming back to that. It's why I kind of whine after a while. We haven't had a scene in a while, because it is a moment where I get to turn my brain off. I get to turn that part of my brain off, and I get to just sort of exist and be. Later, they only devote a little bit of time to actual power exchange in this book, because their thing is mostly sadomasochism, sex, stuff like that, which can be in power exchange, we know. But I also relate that feeling of connection, especially early in our power exchange, when we were very hot and heavy with it, and it was very intense, and we had not like calmed the fuck down and relaxed a little bit. Of when you would give me like lists of things to do, or you would go, I have a task for you, or a project for you, or I would be doing something, even sexy or otherwise, that was very much my submissive role. That was a time when my brain quieted down, and the only thing that mattered was the connection we have with one another.
Right. I think it binds further what we have. I look back my past experiences and I realize that through all of them, having some kind of connection initially was very important to me. I know some people can, just go to a dungeon and, meet somebody and do a quick pickup play, and that's fine. That works for some people. That does not work for me.
No.
I need to have an initial connection, and then when it goes into that scene, when it goes into, other things, it clinches that connection, so to speak.
And I think that the thing that I've had to learn is that you and I, by the force of our relationship and the way it works and who we are with one another, we have a connection all the time.
Right.
But that world dropping away connection, brain quieting connection is not an automatic. It will happen when it happens.
Right.
And I've learned to be okay with that, because even when we don't have that, I don't see anything but you, the world falls away, transcendent moment, there are still really good things happening, and the really good things that I get from the experience, that it almost, cliche as this probably sounds, it makes those times when the world does fall away that much more special. Like, I wouldn't want to try to make it happen. I think that creates a lot of stress, especially if it's just not gonna. I wouldn't want it to happen so often that I take it for granted or become used to it. I miss it when we don't have it, and we certainly do not play often enough for either of us. And we only have ourselves to blame because we control our lives and we're just not doing it. But I am willing to acknowledge and take note and celebrate those times when it's like that connection is, and it's almost like its purest form. We are exchanging that energy back and forth. We are having this moment together where the rest of the world just doesn't even exist. But I also know that's not my normal state of being, and so that's why I was like, oh yes, I highly relate to this moment here. I got to a point, I got halfway through the book, a little over halfway, and I was like, oh my God, I'm skim reading all this stuff, and am I getting nothing from this book? And then we got to a section on my favorite thing ever, and that is intuition. Because I always feel sort of bad about being like, listen to your intuition, listen to your God, listen to your instincts, because I know that is not a skill everybody has. Not everybody trusts their intuition. Sometimes it seems like your intuition and it's really not. And so it's weird. But to see it here, I was like, okay, this is me. And I highlighted massive passages, so I'm gonna try to not read 500 words right here, because that would be boring. So let's just start. And this one I was like, yes, and I want to highlight this. It says, the best definition we've heard of intuition is, quote, knowing what you know without knowing how you know it. Everybody has intuition, although some people are in much better touch with theirs than others. I'm in touch with mine.
That gut feeling.
It's that gut feeling. And I have noticed that when it's something I can analyze, and I know exactly why I think I know it or don't know it or whatever, that's not my intuition. And when I cannot tell you, I just know that I know, that's my intuition. Now they did, and I appreciated this, because like I said, I've always struggled to talk about it, but I know what I know. I'm intuitive. They said some people believe that intuition comes from subconscious observation of phenomena that are far too subtle for the conscious mind to observe. I've heard that, and I kind of, my rational brain goes, yeah, that's probably true. Other people believe in the genuine paranormal phenomena, psychic links, and so on. I am not that person. I do believe there are things out there that I can't possibly understand, and there are things bigger than me, and I accept that, and I'm okay with that. But when I think of my intuition, if I have to try and define it, which is why I don't want to, my logical side goes, you probably are picking up things you just don't know what you're picking up. It's too subtle. I don't really care. I just like my intuition. My intuition, the reason I am so big on it, and I think you have had this experience too, is every time I fucked myself up was when I ignored my intuition.
Absolutely.
Every fucking time. Every time.
Yes. Same. Time I used to call it my gut feeling. And every time I didn't listen to it, it turned out bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it did for me too.
I learned to listen to it, and things are always a lot better.
I didn't highlight this, but they talked about like the ultimate question of how do you know it's your intuition and how do you know it's just like it's what you want, even if it's not the best thing. And they were actually speaking about it specifically within a scene. And I was like, oh, I like this, because there are times you kind of get into that flow state and you just go from item to item, moment to moment. You're not having to do a lot of check-ins. We're just kind of, that energy is flowing between us. And part of it, we plan for success. Like, we only put out toys that I am willing to take. And you, even when you're in that flow state, you're consciously playing within my limits. We don't push boundaries that way. Some people do, as do the authors. They will push boundaries. That's how they like to play. And that's fine. So we set ourselves up for that, where you can just grab what feels right. But they did have a section where they talked about, okay, you have to, you're trying to go on intuition. Is it intuition, or is it your arousal? Is this what, I think when they said, is this what your dick wants? I was like, and they said what you do is you are like, especially if you're trying to learn how to play with your intuition, especially as a top or a dom, is you take that thing, that cane, that paddle, that whatever, that implement, and you try it. And then you watch your partner. And if they have a bad reaction, they tense up, they come out of their own flow state, they protest in a way that's not like part of that energy, then you just got the information that, oh, that was what I wanted, not what the scene wanted. And you move on. But if they go with it, with the thing you're doing, then you picked right. And that's information that teaches you later to learn how to listen to that intuition. Because I think intuition is a thing that some of us are more in tune with than others. But I also think it's like anything else. The more you practice it, the more you use it, the more you get comfortable swimming in it, the more you learn you can rely on it or not rely on it. The first time I was finally sort of woken up to the idea that, okay, you can't just blanketly tell people, listen to your gut. I was watching a Vlogbrothers video, and it was John Green talking about his OCD and his anxiety and all of the stuff he goes through, which I totally relate to. And he said, I can't trust my intuition and my gut because I worry all of the time, and my gut will tell me to do things that are based on irrational fears, not reality. And I was like, that makes sense. But also, as somebody who has that as well, I think it's a little bit of a process. Just like they talked about in the scene, you try a thing out in a way that you can easily pull back from and stop if you need to. And then you observe. It's not, to me, intuition isn't a completely woo-woo thing. It comes from the universe and you're just granted this magical understanding. There still needs to be observation and working with your partner and asking questions and learning. There's still a logical process.
I think when it comes to intuition, it's also a part of a learned skill set.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. It's something you have to exercise like a muscle, so to speak. You know, like from my standpoint, you know, we have played together so much. I know a good squeal from a bad squeal that you make. You know, your body language. I know when you tense up that something is too much, or when you love something, just, you know, how you wiggle just a certain way that, you know, says, bring it, daddy.
I think that's the benefit of being together and long-term players. So there's nothing wrong with casual pickup play. There's nothing wrong with playing once and maybe you don't play again for a long time. But there is a benefit to playing with the same people often enough that you learn that kind of information about them. I think it can make for a deeper, more intuitive experience, simply because even if you cannot explain rationally how you know what you know, all that time of observation and trial and error and trying this thing and trying that thing, you're learning that information.
And I think it's something that goes, you know, as you build that intuition and that understanding, it also deepens the connection.
I think so too.
It kind of all goes hand in hand.
I think so too. Okay, so I want us to end on the thing that relates to us and this channel the most, and it is the section we got from them on power exchange. They did spend a little bit of time talking about 24/7, like a little bit of time, and the difference between that and those who inhabit their roles on a more casual level. So I did not highlight the thing that I really stuck with me, and I don't know why. But basically they talked about the idea that being dom, being sub, top, bottom, that is a role that we inhabit, and it is a role that we take on. It can feel inherent to who we are as a person. It can feel like this is part of my soul. But when we have a power exchange, it is a role we inhabit, even 24/7, even those of us who are attempting to live this all the time. And the reason for that, they say, is because, think about it, you don't walk into your office and be your submissive self or your dom self, not in the same way you are with a partner. I don't talk to the kids the way I talk to you when I'm in subby mode. I have mom role. We all have multiple roles, and they kind of took a moment to say, yeah, even if you're 24/7, like, let's get real. This is a role you're playing that you sometimes have to step out of. Like, there's no way for you to always inhabit
every minute,
that.
every second.
It's not realistic.
Right.
But they mentioned that, and I agree with that. So I didn't feel like they demeaned what power exchange is, but they were pretty firm on that. But they also talked about how there can be problems with those roles, especially if we're not realistic. And I had a little bit of a chuckle. So this was the submissive. It says, many submissives' fantasies are of the big bad wolf, the Klingon, the ice queen, the arrogant, unyielding bitch or son of a bitch. They dream of complete subjugation by an ever-dominant and ever-certain someone. And the same submissive may also want a romantic hero or heroine who will gaze into their innermost soul and wholeheartedly accept whatever is to be found there. They want to be cherished, respected, recognized for the valuable beings they are. Therein lies the paradox of dominance. Love and domination seem, at least on the surface, to be mutually exclusive. How can we love unconditionally while demanding subjugation of will? And I was like, oh. I highlighted all of that because I was like, I, as a submissive who was once new to this and new to different partners, and also as somebody who talks to a lot of submissives, I'm like, yes, those polar extremes, the intensity of those extremes, I tend to see in newer submissives or submissives who are getting into new relationships. And I think that even once you've been doing this for a while, you kind of relax into your role and your submission and whatever that's going to look like for you, and you get used to this partner or this life. You can still have some of those desires, of course, but I think the intensity fades. I don't think we can keep the intensity up to 11 for years and years and years, every moment of every day. That's exhausting. Yeah. I think we go up and we dip down and we go up and we dip down. I think sub-frenzy is definitely a part of that, but not always. And I think that you can want the really harsh, hardcore, this is going to push my limits and you're going to make it hurt and this is going to be hard to get through, while also wanting to be adored. And for me, I actually don't think that, again, I think they're right. From the outside looking in, that looks like a paradox. It looks like that doesn't make any sense. And I think it goes back to remembering that these are different roles that we play because these are different sides of who we are. You have gotten very comfortable being a sadistic daddy. So you're funny and nurturing and caring and teasing and loving and also a bastard at the same time. You're very good at that.
Amazing how all those things can...
They can all flow together. But also, there is a difference between John Brownstone in the scene wailing on my ass and laughing at my pain, consensual. I haven't safe worded, so he can do that, versus John Brownstone in the kitchen with me, maybe giving me an order, maybe giving me dom voice, but also going, are you okay? Is everything okay? Like, I hurt myself and you're not laughing maniacally, because it's a different moment and a different side of you and a different role, and the context changes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's something you and I have talked about, and I've believed in for a long time. There is a big difference between good pain and bad pain. And there is a big difference between smacking your ass with a paddle and watching you squeal and squirm to, slamming your finger in a cupboard door,
Right.
or something,
or burning my finger on a toaster.
yeah,
I did that.
two totally different worlds.
Mm-hmm. So here's one thing else they said. They were talking about dominance and submission that I went, oh yes, I feel this. And it says the problem arises when people get stuck in the source material for their fantasies of control, ownership, force. We all want our play to seem real. Some go so far as to disdain the word play, insisting that what they do is real ownership, real control. And the harder we push to make it real, the more we may lose track of an essential truism of kink. Everyone involved in a scene is in service to that scene. The truism applies whether the scene is a friendly smack on the tush or a lifelong 24/7 relationship. Everyone involved needs to have a roughly similar picture of what the scene is or will be. The more similar the picture, the greater likelihood of a successful outcome. That immediately made me think of our teamwork conversation that we have often. We did a whole episode on it, but that's part of our ethos. That we are a team trying to get to the same place together, have the same basic experience. We come at it from two different sides,
right?
But we're trying to get to the same goal, whatever the goal of a scene is, of a life is, of a moment is.
Yeah.
So we each have our part to play. See, the word play comes back in, the word part, i.e. role, comes back in. We each have the thing we have to do to make that happen, but we have a sense that we're in this together and that we're trying to have a similar outcome.
Yep.
And I think that those moments also are ripe for that moment of connection where things can fall away. This has nothing to do with kink, but everything to do with power exchange. Over the past several months, it has been very stressful around here at Loving BDSM headquarters. We became full-time content creators not because we were ready to. We've had to adjust a lot of things financially. This just been a lot, okay? And this is not my first rodeo of money being tight and what am I going to do, and we're going to have to figure it out. It is the second time actually, that we've gone through this together. And this is the first time that while I am stressed, you're stressed, there is stress. Stress exists. I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because we're doing this together. We know what we want the outcome to be. We don't know what the outcome will be. But we each have our role to play. We are doing this together. We are as connected as ever. We are trying to reach the same goal. We know what we want, and we will work together. And that is a higher level than a quick spanking scene in our bedroom, of course, but it is also not that different. We approach all parts of our life, kink or not, with kind of that same mindset. Now, that does not mean we have not argued and had hurt feelings with one another. It does not mean that we are always on the same page. There are days when I'm more stressed out than you are. There are days when you are more stressed out than I am. It's not always equal and even, but that idea, I know for us, sticks with us throughout our entire relationship and all things, even in these moments that have nothing to do with kink, that are completely outside of the realm of our power exchange. Now, because we are 24/7, it is always part of our power exchange because we're navigating it as dom and sub. So there's that as well. But this whole book was not something that touched me, but there were parts.
Yeah.
And I feel like I want to leave it on that because we are about power exchange. That's what we do here. Do I think there's value in this book? Yeah. I think so. But that's the parts of Radical Ecstasy. There were actually a lot more parts. I highlighted a lot, but I didn't want to read all my highlights to you. Those were the parts that really kind of stuck with me. So I got something valuable out of it, even though I did a lot of skimming. There was a lot of skimming. Not ashamed of it. It's fine. So if you've read the book or if any of the points we highlighted spoke to you, please let us know what you think down in the comments below. But that's it for this. Next month, we are back to fiction. We're reading another anthology. Yay!
All right.
It is called Sweet and Rough, Queer Kink Erotica by Sinclair Sexsmith. This one was both queer and kinky, and I was like, yes, let's read this. That's it for Kinky Book Club this month. If you want to know more about Kinky Book Club, what we're reading, what we've read in the past, all that good stuff, links will be in all the places. And we hope that you will come back and talk books with us again in the future. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you liked it enough to want more and to come back, please consider subscribing.
And once you do that, ring that notification bell to get updates of new content.
Sure, just do what Daddy says. And if you really like what we do, want to help us do more of it, get perks you're not going to get anywhere else, you can join us on Patreon at patreon.com/KaylaLords. Bye.
Bye.